Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Ogbogo.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are, and welcome back to a brand new season of the Shine Out Loud Show. Yes, we had our hot girl summer, I don't know where the summer went and oh my God, it's the end of summer, but I am so glad to be back after a hiatus. And to open the show this season, I have a woman who is many things, as she wears many hats as a publisher, author, speaker, educator. I'm talking about the very powerful and very creative Kandace Chimbiri. So join me and welcome my fantastic guest. Kandace?
Hello. Good
afternoon.
Hi. Good evening, good morning.
Yes, we don't know where people are listening, so we have to make everybody feel welcome.
Exactly.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And so before we jump in, I had to crack my brain, and it shows my age is showing because I'm like, I know I've met you somewhere. And I realized where we had met was many moons ago at the Your Beautiful Woman events that we used to run.
That's right. I came to the event, I think, for a couple of years. And it was quite novel at the time, I think, as well. I don't think at the time anyone was doing anything like that.
No, we opened that floodgate of, we were pioneers in creating events that was celebrating and loving Black women and loving women of color and reminding us about how powerful and beautiful and amazing we are. So thank you for the support way back when. But we're not talking about that. What we are here to talk about is you authoring 4 Black history books for children.
That's right.
So let's jump in. What prompted you to start not just writing books, but starting your publishing company, Golden Destiny, in 2009?
So it wasn't something that I had planned to do from when I was young. Sometimes people say, I knew I wanted to be a writer from the time I was age 6 or age 8. That wasn't the case. I was already coming up to 40 years old at the time. But for a few years before that, I would go into the shops, and I worked near the very big Waterstones at the time on Piccadilly, which is the biggest bookstore in Europe. That's what they claim to be, the biggest bookstore in Europe. And they have a huge section of 10,000 unique titles. So they claim to carry 10,000 different children's books, which is possibly true because it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go in there and I would be looking for books for my godchildren, friends' children. And it just struck me, there's 10,000 books in there and there's nothing for children of colour, or not very much reflecting even people of colour. That would be good for children to see, Black children, but even other children as well. So it really did disturb me, and I thought I need to do something about this. And I've always loved history. And for me, history is very empowering. I remember being in school, learning about the Haitian Revolution, and it had such a powerful impact on me. And I felt that's something that our children should be able to receive as well.
Right.
I looked, I couldn't find the right books. There were some books on Black history, but what was there tended to concentrate a lot on enslavement. There was very, very little about ancient African history, so that children could understand there's this long history before that. And when there was something like that, very often some of the factual information was incorrect, or it wasn't portrayed in a way that I felt it should have been. So that's how the idea started. And in terms of self-publishing, I'll be honest, maybe if I had thought about it a bit more, maybe I wouldn't have gone that route. But at that time, I felt I wanted some control over how it was done, how
Right.
the images were presented, and that's how it started.
Well, that is actually a very powerful reason why, and a powerful reason why you said, "Yeah, I need to do this." So, what was the response to the step back in time to ancient Kush? What was that response like?
Well, that's the thing. So when you're writing and self-publishing, you have to be, in a sense, wearing two hats, and sometimes two hats that don't always complement each other.
Right.
Because you're writing, that's your passion. You're writing to reach the audience, to bring out this book that needs to be out there on the shelves. And then the self-publishing side is more of I would say, it's like the writing is probably more creative,
Mm-hmm.
and the self-publishing has to be more of a entrepreneurial business head, and you've got to try and bring those two together. And
Right.
it's very difficult to do both at the same time. So I wrote the book, and it's just a small activity book. So it's good for children who don't necessarily want to do a lot of reading, but can learn through doing the word searches, the colouring in, the dot to dots, and so on. And once I put it together, then I realised, oh my gosh, I've put this book together. It's on a boat coming to me, and I haven't even thought about marketing it. So literally, it was on a boat, and I was like, oh, what do I do now? So I spoke to a few people, and there was a guy who had a talk, and he said, just come around to my talk and just show people. And that's what I did. There were maybe 40 people, no more than 40. They loved the book, and they all went out. They bought it, and they all went out, and they emailed friends, told people about the book, and I've sold 4,000 copies.
Amazing.
And that's just from 40 people, and these were all people of African descent at this event, who saw it, understood what I was trying to do, and they spread the word. And that's pretty much, because I still have a full-time job, and that's pretty much still the situation. It's all word of mouth by people like you, people who know that this is something that's needed, and people who just tell a friend, buy the book, spread the word, and that's literally how I do it. I should be doing more, but it's difficult to do both, and so I rely on people like you.
Wait, Kandace, did you just say you still have a full-time job?
Yes, I still have a full-time job.
Okay, so we're going to talk about time management in a moment down the line, but how do you balance the two in terms of your creativity, in terms of the work, in terms of even you being the owner of a publishing house? How do you manage all of those moving parts and still have time to create?
It's not always easy, and I must admit, every time I do a book, at the end I say, that's it, I'm not doing any more. I've had enough, it's too much, I'm not doing any more. And then I find myself doing another one. I think sometimes it's the reaction that I get from parents or teachers, it just gives me that inspiration to keep going. Time management, I don't know if I really do the best job of it. I don't really know if I'm a good example of it. But I just feel so passionate about having these books that will help children. And somehow I just get up sometimes if I'm really going through a period where I need to get a lot done. I'll get up sometimes at 6, do some writing for an hour. Sometimes I'll spend most of the weekend in just writing. And that's really the only way I can do it.
Wow. Okay. So we've talked about, step back in time to ancient Kush. You then set out to educate again with the story of early ancient Egypt. Was this the result of material from your first book? Why did you actually decide that this was going to be your next book?
Well, that's an interesting question because I didn't actually decide that. And the progress of the books, it's something that I hadn't really realized until someone pointed it out. But every book that I've done, apart from the first one, every book has been as a result of the previous book. Right. So I've done the book, someone's either liked it or supported it, and then it's led very organically to the next one.
Right.
So the first book was about ancient Kush, step back in
Yes.
time to ancient Kush, which was in the Sudan. So it was in the ancient Nile Valley,
Yes.
and it was a civilization that existed alongside Egypt, and they had a relationship with ancient Egypt. Sometimes they were friends, sometimes they were fighting, and I did that.
And sometimes they were married into both sides, and they were known as the Black Pharaohs.
Well, yes and no. So there's a little bit of controversy with the idea of the Black Pharaohs
Mm.
because basically the Kushites were based in Sudan, and it's accepted and understood that they were black. There is a theory which many mainstream Egyptologists still have, which is that the ancient Egyptians were not black, that the ancient Egyptians were either, I don't know, maybe looked like the people today in Egypt, people
Mm-hmm.
who are Arabic looking. So this is the main one of the main theories. There was a dynasty, so a period of time for about 100 years, where there was a dynasty, we call it the 25th dynasty, and it was a foreign dynasty that ruled Egypt, and they came from Kush, so they were Kushites. So when you see programs about the Black Pharaohs or books about the Black Pharaohs, what they are saying is that the 25th dynasty, which was from Kush or the Sudan, were black,
Mm-hmm.
but the implication being then that the rest of the Egyptians were not.
Right.
Yes. So, yeah, so that's what that's about. Yes.
It's interesting the way that conversation is carried, but we won't delve too far into that because, like you said, there are different controversies and different theories, and there's some theories that I've actually read that go as far as trying to label ancient Egypt as being that of aliens. But like I said, this it's you're like, okay, we'll leave that alone. But let's go back to the books. Now,
Yes.
we were talking about the books in your first and second books, and then you have The Secrets of the Afro Comb, which is a unique concept. How did you decide that, yes, this was going to be the concept for this particular book?
So I didn't decide. I was given that as my first book that I was commissioned to write. So I did self-publish it, but it was written and self-published alongside an exhibition called Origins of the Afro Comb, which was in 2013, and it took place in the Fitzwilliam Museum, part of the University of Cambridge. So what happened was I just came along, I did my little Kush book, and that was a 16-page activity book about the Kushites. And I was also at the time doing tours and getting to know some of the museums that have Egyptian collections. And that led then to the story of early ancient Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of those two books, which were about the Nile Valley, when the curator of the exhibition, Origins of the Afro Comb, decided to do this exhibition, and she decided on doing it because they had a comb in their collection which was from ancient Egypt, and it resembled a modern Afro comb.
Wow.
And they had the two combs, and that was actually the starting point of the exhibition, to have this comb from Egypt 6,000 years ago next to the Black Power Fist comb of, that was inspired by the Black Fist in the 1960s Olympics when
Yes.
there was the protest against the discrimination and the issues, that we were facing in America. So as a result of those first two books, they said, would you do a children's book to go alongside our exhibition? And the exhibition was Origins of the Afro Comb. And so I came up with the title Secrets of the Afro Comb, and that's how it came about.
Okay. While writing that book, what was your biggest aha moment?
I think it was, funny enough, not so much about history, but about, interestingly, I would say, the biology of our hair types. So, obviously, I'm passionate about history. I was able to do the history side of it, but what was quite new for me was understanding why our hair is the way it is naturally and how different it is from maybe other groups of hair, and then
Right.
putting that information together for children. And it was an aha moment because I thought to myself, even though you have books that celebrate, and hopefully more now, celebrate black skin, we don't really have books that tell us a lot about our hair for children, and not in this way, that explain the hair follicles, explain how our hair grows, how unique it is,
Hmm.
and so for me that was quite an aha moment, and I thought we need more books like that. So this was just a brief explanation, but I think we need more.
Definitely, they definitely need more books on black hair, and there are quite a few books coming out. And I had the pleasure of seeing one while I was out on holidays recently, and I know publishers in the UK who are writing books about our hair, about young children's hair. So there is that conversation, like you said. There's always room for more books.
Definitely, definitely.
And you said something very important. Your books have a target range, so you start at 7 to 11. What was that? What was it about that age bracket that made you go, "Yes, I'm going to choose that age bracket to write to"?
I think by that age most children are able to read pretty good. I mean, they fairly well. They may, still be developing their reading skills, obviously,
Hmm.
but they can read and they want to read and they also want to learn. And when you look at books in the mainstream, there are a lot of books for that age range covering a lot of different topics,
Hmm.
because that's an age where children really, really absorb a lot of information. So that was partly it. But also because when you are writing, one of the things that you do, or you want to be a writer, you have to look at other books, you have to see how they're done. And it was just the type of writing that appealed to me. It was just the age that I really, really enjoy writing for.
That's amazing, and I'm sure you have some parents sneaking the books and going, "Yes, it's for the kids,"
Ah,
but
well,
you have the parents going, "Yeah, I didn't know this," so I'm sure the parents are enjoying the books just as well.
well, I have to be honest with you. Many, if not most of my books are bought equally by adults.
See?
Even the first one that is an activity book, because when I do signings and I say, I just ask people, they say, "Oh, I'm buying it for myself." And what they say, which is very interesting, is, "I never had books like this when I was young and I'm buying it for myself." So it's not, so people obviously are buying it, you're buying it for your grandchildren, for your children, for friends, but people also buy these books for themselves. A lot of adults are reading these books.
Well, you know what? That's powerful, and I can identify with that because we didn't have them growing up. So I wanna own some.
Yes, well, they're
Uh,
available.
my nephews can borrow my books when they're ready, but they'll have to return it. So yeah.
Exactly. And some people just buy them. They just say, "I'm just going to buy it. I'm just going to have it in the house so that when friends or family come over, we can read it and we can look at it together." So, it's really actually interesting to hear when people say, "Oh, this is who they're buying it for, or why they're buying it and how they're using it." It's really interesting, actually.
Okay. So we're talking about history. Now, I love history. It was one of my favorite subjects in school. But let's admit, to the masses, history can seem to be a semi-dull subject. How do you turn that into an engaging read for children?
So I think it is dull because a lot of it, obviously focuses on dates, this happened in this date, and, maybe some dry facts and things like that. But it was actually a child who inspired me. That He's 20 now. He was 20 last week. So it was about 10 years ago when he was 10, and he liked history. And I said to him, "Oh, that's quite unusual. Why do you like history?" He said, "Well, I like it because it's about people."
Mm.
And I thought, wow, from the mouth of a child, how simple, but how accurate. And that is really what it should be about. Of course, the time frames and the figures and everything are important. But really, what we're learning about is people. Just, you watch soap opera because you want to see how people are, going on. History can be just the same. You can make it exciting, particularly when you're telling people about people they don't know or haven't heard about already, or histories they haven't heard. People will find that interesting, but it's the way you do it, I think.
And that's, yeah, I have to agree with you. So we're talking about books that are specifically geared towards the BME community. Why is it important for us as a community to own our own stories?
Wow, that's a very good question. It goes to, for me, why I wanted to self-publish rather than go mainstream when I started this. When you own your own stories, you choose what is told. It's like a photo album. If you have a photo album and you're putting it together of your life, you've got 100 photos. You're going to go through and you're going to pick those that portray the way you want to be portrayed. So most people, we're going to put in the best photos. But let's be honest, we may not always put in. We might put in some ones that maybe they don't look that great, but there's someone in the photo and that's the only one we have, and that has to go in. So you are controlling what you put in. You know yourself best, and you can do it in that. If I gave you some photos and I said, oh, Lillian, here's some photos, just put them and put my life together, you can do it, but it's not going to be the same. And also, in many cases, there isn't always that passion. Sometimes people, sometimes as people, we can be self-centered. It doesn't have to only be like that. And I'm not saying that you have to be black to write black history. I'm not saying that at all. But if you are coming from that community, they're little things that you will focus on that maybe someone who doesn't come from that wouldn't focus on.
Right.
And so that's why I think it's quite important to own the stories and own it. It's our history. We should own it and put it out there for everyone to enjoy.
That's a very, very good point. And I think there's something that we need to be reminded that on a consistent basis that we need to tell our story because we have that place of deep interest and we know it well.
And we have the interest and we know it well. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we're looking at the books, and you spoke about the Fitzwilliam Museum collaboration that happened, and you also had a VA Museum collaboration exhibition. How did that one come about? So
that one came about as a result of the Afro Comb book as well. Yeah. So that one was more of a photographic event project, working with children and families and having them dress, and they had a photographer who took photos and they displayed it in one area in the museum for a while. So that was a slightly smaller exhibition, but it again came about as a result of the writing. And I think that's one of the things that I find interesting as a result of the book, because when you write, you are bringing out something and you're putting it out there in the world.
Yes.
And then it goes out from there. But you don't really know exactly how people are going to use it or what parts they're going to find interesting. So there could be some things that I think, well, this is the part that people are going to like best in the book. Mm-hmm. And it could be completely different. Someone could say, that's the part I find interesting, and I'm going to take that part and I'm going to use that and do an exhibition. Or I'm going to use that and do something else. Or can we work together on doing a project around this part, So it's different things just come out of it, and it's what people get from it,
Yeah, I think that's actually very, very powerful, because your stories have led to these collaborations that has created a whole different story in itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about your books, we're talking about the work that you do, and for some people that don't know what Kandace also does, you also do talks, you do workshops that are also geared at adults, and we'll touch on that in a few moments. But I want to talk about the story of the Windrush. When you were creating that, were there any personal stories from your own family line included in that book?
Lillian, to be honest with you, no. Now,
Okay.
my parents came to England from Barbados in the 1960s. They met here. They didn't meet in Barbados. My dad came in 1962. My
Okay.
mum came in 1965. So they are the Windrush generation. I'm a child of the Windrush. But as you can see from my previous books, Step Back in Time to Ancient Kush,
Mm-hmm.
Secrets of the Afro Comb, 6,000 Years, these are books, and I do concentrate on our history before enslavement. So it's not something that I normally do. I don't normally write about more modern history. I don't usually write about enslavement or history after that. But I was aware that the 70th anniversary of the arrival of the Windrush was coming up, and I was aware that there were still not many books about this, even though this is one of the most pivotal events in modern British history. Not
Yeah.
modern British Black history, in modern British history, full stop.
Yes.
That was a pivotal event, and this goes to the heart of why I do the writing and the self-publishing. Why are there not hundreds of books about that, and why haven't there been hundreds of books over the last 70 years? So that's why I decided to do this one. And I did it not for me personally or not to be about my parents' story. I did it for the community. I did it for everyone else.
Right.
So I didn't focus on my parents at all. I focused on the life of Sam King, who was from Jamaica. He came back to Britain on the Windrush, and I had heard him speak several times. I had been to Black History Talks, and I heard him speaking. He was a very inspirational person. He came into my mind, and I sat down and I wrote the book on that basis. So it's a tribute to the whole Windrush generation. It's a tribute to the wider African and African Caribbean community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tribute to people who in Britain are happy that we have a society where people can come from all over the world, which could not happen so easily 70 years ago. So it wasn't about my parents, really.
Okay. And I appreciate you answering that question. And look, you mentioned something about when you were talking right now about the Windrush being the Afro-Caribbean and African story. And when you look at how the Windrush saga was reported by the mainstream media, it's been done in a way to almost exclude the African story in that story. So how does one go about telling a unified story of the under the Windrush umbrella?
So the Windrush itself, the Windrush generation itself, does refer only to the African Caribbean people. In my book, I mention that there were other people on the boat. I mentioned, which some people didn't know, that there were also Polish people on the boat coming over.
Really?
I mentioned that there were Indian Caribbean people on the boat as well. So there were different people on the boat. But when the boat arrived from the Caribbean, and it wasn't just Jamaicans, the majority of the people were Jamaicans, but there were also Trinidadians, a few Barbadians, there were Guyanese, there were a variety of people from the Caribbean on the boat. When the boat arrived, there was very much a focus on the fact that these people were black people. And
Right.
it actually led later to the Keep Britain White issues and the campaign and all of that went on. And about 10 years later, there were also riots, race riots,
Yes.
in London and other parts of the UK. So the phrase the Windrush generation, it does refer to African Caribbean people. But that does not mean that things that have happened to that community haven't also happened to the African community. There were also people from Africa coming. Now, on page 41, I think it is, of the book, there is a photo of a man who is addressing the African Caribbean arrivals, another black man. And he's an African. His name was Johnny Smythe. He came from Sierra Leone, and he was instrumental in helping the African Caribbeans to settle in the UK, and he helped them. And he was an African from West Africa. So it is, so it is a wider story. It's a story that everybody should know. But the phrase Windrush generation applies to the people from the Caribbean. And that also doesn't mean that everybody who came on the Windrush.
Right.
Because that's another thing. Some people are saying, well, we keep hearing about the Windrush. And I explain that in the book. It's just a catchphrase. It's just a catchphrase, an overreaching phrase or word to capture one segment of people. But it doesn't mean that there are not also other people. So there are also people that we call the Windrush Poles. And they were the Polish people who were on the boat. Now, they were white, so their experience is slightly different. But they also came on the boat as well. And like I said, there was Johnny Smythe who was on the boat, and he was from Africa. So, it is useful to have these phrases to explain things, but it doesn't mean that it excludes other stories as well.
And I think the way that you phrase it is actually powerful, and I think it's something that needs to be shared more. And for me, as someone who I've read some history, I didn't know that there were people of other origins on the Windrush boat. So it's actually quite, being able to tell that story in that way is actually quite powerful and important that it's told.
Definitely. And there were Indian Caribbeans on the boat as well.
So it's very important that this story is told not just to children, but to adults, to anyone with ears that would listen.
I agree. I definitely agree.
So we're talking about you, Kandace, publisher, author, speaker, educator. So let's talk about some of the challenges that you've had to navigate as an owner of a publishing company.
Well, that is hard, and like I said, I feel more confident about the writing than the actual publishing side. But I do enjoy it, and I do enjoy, once I've done the writing, working with other people to then bring the book to life, because that's really what publishing is. It's having the book laid out, it's having the book illustrated, it's researching and finding the photos. I enjoy it, but that also has its challenges, because you need to find people who can understand what it is you're trying to do, believe in what you're trying to do, and help you to make this the best product that you can make it. And that can sometimes be challenging. And then it's challenging because you then have to communicate your ideas, because you've been writing, for 6 months or whatever, doing this very, very solitary, lonely project. And then you have to turn it over to other people to help you bring it to life. And that's sometimes a little challenging, It's sometimes challenging, yeah.
Okay, so for those who don't know, we know what the author's job is. The author's job is to present and create and bring this book to life. What does a publisher do?
So I would say the author's job is to write the book. That's all an author really needs to do, write. The publishing side is editing the book. So you may write, and then after you will need to look at how many words you have, the word count, think about how it's being broken down. You do that a bit when you're writing as well, but you need to make it into a format where the chapters, what's each chapter going to be. So you do all of that. And then you have to have it printed. So you have to think about the size of the book. So all 4 of my books are completely different sizes.
Right.
They have similar but different looks as well. So you have to think about, is it going to be heavily illustrated? Are you going to have more photos than illustrations? And you have to put all of that together as part of the publishing process. And then once that's done, you have to have it printed, and you have to pay for that as well.
Okay, so the publisher is the one that does the actual work of bringing the book from the written stage to the actual public.
Yes, that's right. So the publisher takes care of all those steps. And if I were published by, say, a mainstream publisher, so if I didn't self-publish, then what I would have done is after I'd written the book, I would send it. Usually now you need to send it to an agent rather than direct to the publisher. And they will take a look at it. And then if they want it, they usually pay a small fee, an advance to hold the book. And then they will go ahead, they will commission the illustrators, they will lay out the book, they will have the book printed, and they will also do the marketing of the book.
Right. So everything now falls on your shoulder. And there's a lot of people that right now want to produce their own books. A lot of people are thinking, I have a book in me. I'm not sure I can get an agent. Would you advise anyone to self-publish?
It's a hard question because I think it depends on what you want to achieve. Now, if you, let's say you want to self-publish a book, maybe you just want to do a book for the family. Maybe you just want to write about someone, that was in the family and you don't really care if this book goes to the wider public. You just really want to do it and have it go to, I don't know, maybe some people in your church, maybe your grandmother, maybe family members overseas. Maybe you just want to do 100 copies. Then self-publish, definitely.
Right.
That's all you need. Maybe you want to do a bit more. Maybe you want to write something and you want to publish it, but maybe you go to church or, you have some other organization you're involved with. Maybe you think, okay, I'll just do a couple thousand and I can get those. You might want to self-publish as well. If you want to reach a wider audience, which I do and I try to do, then you do need to think very carefully about whether or not you can handle the responsibilities of self-publishing. Self-publishing is very easy to do now, but it's not easy to do it and get your books into mainstream bookshops.
Right.
And part of the reason for that is, there are different reasons, but one of the reasons, which is justifiable, is that very often, because a book is self-published, sometimes the standards can be low. So maybe spelling errors, maybe, one bookshop told me that they have to turn down a lot of books because of the look of the books, unfortunately. I know that shouldn't be like that, but people that are selling books in bookshops, they're running a business.
Yes.
And if the book, has a font, maybe it's fonts that you can get free off of the, I don't know where people get free fonts from, but whatever. It's not going to look
aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's it. You have to think that there are so many books out there, and your book needs to be able to sit next to other books and stand up, against them. So you have to really consider, can you really do that? And if you can't, then maybe your best approach is to try to get published mainstream. Mm-hmm. That also gives you the option then of freeing up your own time to concentrate more on the writing, because it takes time to also do the marketing and to do the publishing as well.
Right. Okay. So, Kandace, while we were going on, a question has come in from someone listening, and he would like to know is, do you intend to write an adult version of any of your current books?
That is a question that I have been asked, funny enough, in the last couple of weeks. And a few people have said that to me. At the moment, I don't plan to, because at the moment, my passion is the books at this sort of an age range, and the fact that I know adults are reading them as well. So at the moment, no plans, but that can change.
Okay. So we've been talking about all of your work. We've been talking about the books, the journey to where you got to. And I mentioned that you give workshops and talks for adults on ancient warrior queens of the Sudan for Black History Walks, Nefertiti, a Black icon, in question marks, African artifacts in European museums. Oh, that one, I would love to come to that one. Because you say African artifacts, I go House of Stolen Stuff, which is what I call the British Museum, and female rulers of the ancient Nile Valley. So where can we find these workshops?
So you I usually have them on my website, which I'm going to be updating soon, and that's
Okay.
goldendestiny.co.uk. And I usually have them on there. I also have a contact form, so people can contact me through that, and then I can send out details by email, because I tend to get around to doing that quicker than updating the website, which is
Okay.
another thing you have to do when you're self-publishing. So I tend to put the details out there or by email, and people can reach me via my website.
Okay. So, yes, keep us posted. Send us details of the next talk that you're doing. We'll gladly share it for you, and keep us posted. So we keep talking about your books, and we keep talking about history. And my question is: are there any other Black historical figures? So let me rephrase that, just in case you didn't, people didn't hear me. Black British historical figures you feel children, young adults should know about, or that they've not been taught in schools in the UK.
Yes, I mean, there are quite a few. There are quite a few. One is a gentleman called Ignacio Sanchez.
Okay.
Sanchez was I think the Spanish version. I think he's Sancho. And he lived in the 1700s, so maybe around 1750. He was a writer, and he's also the first known Black British voter. Not many people know that. Back
Oh,
in the 1700s, in the height of enslavement, he came here. He was abolitionist, and I think he had a store. I think he had a shop, and he had a good lifestyle. And he was able to vote because obviously in those days you could only vote if you had an income of a certain amount or you owned property. And he was the first known Black British voter. And so he should definitely be known by every child in school here, but I doubt he is. I would also say maybe Olado Equiano, who
mm-hmm.
lived around the same time. I think they actually knew each other. He was Ibu. He came from Nigeria. He had been kidnapped when he was around 12, I think, enslaved. He was enslaved in the Caribbean. And he managed to get his freedom, and he came to Britain. And he was in an organization called the Sons of Africa, which was an abolitionist organization. And he worked to help to end enslavement. So it wasn't just the English abolitionists like Clarkson and the others that you hear about. There were people like Equiano and Sancho here as well doing that. So they are two from hundreds of years ago. And I would say in more recent times, someone that everyone should know about is a lady called Claudia Jones. I think she was around in the 50s. She originally came from Trinidad and then via America came here. And she was a pioneer in the civil rights movement. She actually started a carnival. She started a Caribbean carnival. It was indoors. And she
Really?
started it in response to the race riots. So this would have been 10 years after the Windrush. So 1958, there were race riots. The Keep Britain White thing was all going on and all of this type of thing. And she had the idea. She worked, I think, with Sam King and others as well, to do a carnival to bring people together. And so that was, 50 years before Notting Hill Carnival. So
Now
they're
that's
definitely three people should know about.
so, and that's very powerful because we don't know what we don't know, and our history. When we don't know our history, we believe that we are less than, and this is why when I asked you the question about owning our own story, this is exactly why, in your words, we need to own our own stories because we need to be educated in these stories.
Yeah. But I think as well, it's something that we really have to do. Part of the reason why I think people don't know these three stories and don't know a lot of Black British history, I think part of it is globalization. So that's another thing. These publishing houses, they're businesses, and they're usually part of a corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the books, and that was another thing, even now I'm starting to see a bit more Black history in the books, but it tends to be American Black history. So it will be about Martin Luther King, maybe Malcolm X. Sometimes they'll put in Mandela as well. So it's good, and we do need to know that. But there is Black British history, but what often happens is the same books get published in America as well as Britain. And that's part of why we need to also promote the Black British history.
Absolutely agree. So we've been talking about our history and Black history, and invariably we're coming up to Black History Month. Do you believe that there is a flaw in how Black History Month portrays Black history?
When you say a flaw, Lillian, what do you mean?
So there seems to be a constant, in my opinion, and strictly my opinion only, there seems to be a concentration on the slavery aspect, and it seems that our history in Black History Month seems to start with slavery. It's rare that you find conversations that in the work that you do that go before slavery, that we had a rich history before slavery, and there's a history after. Because if you're telling kids slavery, I'm not saying discounting that we shouldn't talk about slavery. It's important. It's the history, but what happened before and after needs to be discussed in equal measure and equal weight.
Yeah, I do agree. I agree. I think part of the issue may be that sometimes people want to do something, but they don't know maybe enough about any other side. Maybe that could be part of the reason. But I also find that a lot of the events in Black History Month aren't actually, strictly speaking, history. I think people quite struggle to find ideas. I do tours of a museum called the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology. Actually, I'm doing one on the 28th of September. That's the next one.
Okay.
And I take people around there and I show them about 10 objects from ancient Egypt that are related to the Black history, and most people are astounded. And one of the things that people are also astounded about is that we have a portrait, a statue of the face of the first pharaoh. And hardly anybody knows it's there. There's so much, but just don't know it's there. So if you don't know, I think it becomes very tricky then to put on events outside of that. So Black History Month comes, people want to do something, so I guess the easiest thing is enslavement. So maybe that could be part of the reason. It has to change, though. I agree with you. It's not right, but maybe that's why. I don't know.
Well, you've just said something to me. Where is this? You said you have the event coming up on the 28th. Where can you share the details with us so that we can share it on social media, so that we can all turn up?
Yes. So I work because I like to do things, because obviously I have my publishing and my writing to do. So I actually do it in conjunction with a lady called Avro Nanton.
Okay.
That's Avro and Nanton, Nanton, and she has a website. We can actually find her on Facebook. Is probably the easiest way, and she does the booking, so we do it together. And I do the tours, but she handles all the other side of it, and she does her own tours as well. So she's also out there promoting the Black history, and so you can book through Avro Nanton, and 28th of September. I'll take you around the Petrie Museum, show you lots of Black history connected to the ancient Nile Valley, which you didn't know was there.
Okay.
It's a museum that has 80,000 objects from ancient Egypt.
I intend to be there, so I'm going to go. Please send me the link, book it, and be there with my camera and a little handheld recorder, and you can tell me and walk me through the marvels that will be there.
It's a deal.
Awesome. Okay, so we've talked about your work, and now I want to talk about you, because looking at everything that you've done, looking at where you are with your journey so far, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
I would say do it now. I wish that I had started this earlier. I really do. I wish I had done this a lot earlier, a lot sooner. I would say do it now. Just get on with it and get more books out there. That's what I would do. That's what I tell myself.
Okay. All right. So, with that in mind, do it sooner, write more books. How do you manage your time? You have your day job, you have the business, you have the writing side. How do you manage your time?
Badly. Very, very badly. But, I'm actually now realizing that you actually work best when you take some time for yourself. So what I do now, I don't feel guilty if I decide I'm going to have a day, I'm not writing. I'm just going to have a day out. I'm going to just chill out, relax, and do things for me. And I do that. If I need a couple of evenings off, I do that. I enjoy life. I have friends. I have quite an active life. I do all of those things. But then when I'm ready to write, I try. It doesn't always happen because sometimes work gets in the way and other things get in the way. But I do try to commit to some blocks of time. So like I said, sometimes I may get up earlier and maybe try and do an hour before work. Sometimes I try to do things in my lunch hour, but that's tricky because it's very difficult to switch off because you kind of have to switch, into like different brains. So that's tricky. Weekends, I can carve out some time and do stuff on the weekends, and that's just how you have to do it. I think, it's like most things in life. I think you have to just look for small amounts of time regularly. That's what you want. Small amounts of time, but regularly.
Okay. So I have this question. As an author, hardback books or digital formats? What's your preference?
So I have never done anything digital. I get asked for them quite a lot, but it's very tricky with the books that I do because the first one also was an activity book, so that was a bit tricky. But with my books, all of the others, they have photos in them because I like people to see the photos from the time that are illustrating, look, that person was there, that's how that person looked.
Right.
As a small pub, so when you get photos, you obviously have to pay for the right to use them. You pay a licensing fee to whoever is the copyright holder. Now, if I was a big publisher, it would be no problem, but you have to pay more to get the rights to distribute them digitally. So as a small publisher, I wouldn't be able to afford to pay for that. So I can only afford to do them in the hardback, in the paper or hardback physical book.
Okay.
And all my books have those photos.
For me, I have to say, as much as I love digital format books, because for ease, a good book, there's something about being able to hold a book and crack open the page for the first time and actually smell and touch that book. That for me is fun. I know it sounds really dull and boring, but yes.
No. And another thing, these books also, I want children to enjoy reading, and maybe it's quite good for them to have that time away from a screen as well and get into a physical book, So I do actually prefer the physical books.
I do. There's something about sitting down a comfortable chair, getting lost in a library and holding a book. And yes, there's, for me, that's just ideal. But hey, everyone has different preferences.
Yep. Different choices out there.
Exactly. So we've come to that point of our show where we have our So Loud moment of the week. Now, for those who don't know, and if it's your first time joining us, our So Loud moment of the week is where our incredible guest gives us, shouts out a person, a thing, even herself, that says something over, and we say it's for the week, but it can be longer than a week ago. It could be in infamy or infinity. Sorry, couldn't speak there. But it's a moment for us to celebrate someone, something, or somewhere. So, Kandace, what is your So Loud moment of the week?
Can I say my parents? Is that acceptable?
Parents are acceptable. Definitely acceptable.
My parents. I'm blessed with the parents I have. My parents have supported me. Well, obviously they supported me when I was a child, but they have supported me in this journey. And I don't think I could have really done it without their encouragement and belief.
Oh, that's lovely. So, to Kandace's parents, we give you a huge round of applause from us here. And yes, we love supportive parents. So we've come. I'm at loss of what else to ask because there's so much I want to know. There's so much that I want to know what you are doing. So let's start here. What's next for you? Tell us more about your future projects.
So, funny enough, my next project is going to be not ancient history again. I'm actually going to do a book a little bit about the story from before the Windrush.
Okay.
I just have a real passion to do something about that. So it will be about Black British history, but it will be from just before the Windrush. And I'm in the process of structuring it and getting it together and doing some research. So I'll just say watch this space.
Okay. Well, we are looking forward to reading your next books and actually getting your books for my nephews. Lies for me. My nephews can borrow it. So here's my last question. You say you didn't grow up thinking about wanting to be an author. So what did you want to be when you grew up as a child?
I don't think I had a clue what I wanted to be. I wish I could say, oh, I knew I wanted to be. I don't think I had a clue. I didn't think about what I wanted to do when I was grown up. And I haven't really had a plan. I think I've just kind of fallen into the job and things like that. But then when I realized I wanted to write these books, I realize now that's what I need to do. And it's tricky because for a long time I didn't actually call myself a writer. Even after I'd done books, I still didn't call myself a writer and an author because it didn't feel, I don't know, it kind of felt fake.
Right.
And it's actually only now that I'm getting to the stage where I accept that this is what I do and it's what I want to do and what I intend to continue to do.
That's incredible. And I want to explore that whole idea of feeling fake and what that was around. So please, can we talk about that a bit more?
I don't know. I don't know if it's because, despite the fact that I chose to self-publish, I don't know if it's because I felt, well, I don't know, but I wanted to do the first book and I did it, and then I wanted to do the second one and it then led to the third one, and now I've done the Windrush one, and I know how I feel and I get them done. But literally, even after doing these books, I still was shy about describing myself as an author. I really, really was. It's only now I kind of, I've grown in. I feel like I've grown into it. I feel like, yeah, I deserve to be called this now. But I didn't feel that at first.
That is very interesting, and that talks about a whole different conversation we could go into around the imposter syndrome and that which tends to afflict women like us. But Kandace, you are most definitely an author, incredible one at that, a publisher, and such an amazing woman. So yes, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for doing the work that you do.
And thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's a wrap, guys. We have just had this incredible woman share with us. If you want to know more, please go onto her website. It's goldendestiny.co.uk. Find her on social media. She has these incredible books out for children, us, and let's support this woman, this mission to educate ourselves and for us to literally own our own stories. So Kandace, once again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Alrighty, guys, it's done. So yes, the show is back. Join us same time next week for another show. You know how you do. You know what we do. So if you want to reach out to us, You know our social media handles. Reach out, say hi, tell us you want to be on the show. Tell us what you think. We'll love to hear from you. Good night.
You've been listening to The Shine Out Loud Show. If you want to connect with us or let us know what you thought of today's show, be sure to follow us on Twitter @Shine Out Show.